Alright, so we are going to start our free block for this month, and it's going to be this guy, which I've named Batty and Happy. And it's a little bat trick-or-treating with his little skull trick-or-treat bag. And these, with the group, they give us a color palette that we need to follow. So the only difference here is that I'm using a purple that they don't have. And I'm going to use a yellow, but I could go closer to that. So the first thing I have to do though is pick my fabrics. This is all going to be pre-cut little pieces. So it looks like we need to have a purple for the background, and then we need a light gray for the ground, a tan for the door, we need a yellow for the moon and the doorbell. We need orange for the hat band and the strap. Then we need something for the hat. And then we need black for the bat and a dark gray for the bat. And actually I'm going to make this even the darkest gray because we want the bat to be as dark as we can, but we also want those eyes to pop off. So if we go with a really dark gray for the bat, and then I can go black for the inner eye and white for the outer eye, it will pop better. So those are some of the things I consider when I think about how these things are going to go together. And then we have a lighter gray that's for the nose and the inner ears. The white's the eyes and the teeth. The white is the skull. And then whatever I use for the hat, I'll probably use inside the skull skull trick-or-treat bag. So I'm going to start pulling out fabrics, and in the end I'll show you what we come up with. I happen to have spider webs from Matthew's Bouville line, so we'll probably use that just for the hat. Let's see what we got for grays and alright, so for the orange, we're going to go with the lighter orange over the darker orange because this is already dark in value and this is like a medium in value, so it'll pop better off of the dark. So there's the orange. Let's see what else we got. None of these other colors are going to work. This gray, let's just pull out all the grays we have and we can figure out, because we really need a light, and maybe that's the same gray, the nose and the eye, the nose and the ear in this, so that's light gray. And then we need a medium gray for the accents, and then a dark, dark gray, almost black for the bat. And then we need plain black and white. Let me grab that. So I keep I have two little drawers under my sewing table, and anytime I have plain black or white scraps, they go in those drawers. So when I am doing something little like this where I just need a little bit of black or white, I just pull it out of the drawer and I don't have to go get yardage for it. So those are the eyes and the nose. I do have this really fun textured white. I think I'm going to use that for the skull though. I think that'll be fun. So we're done with these. And so when I'm picking fabrics for a quilt, it's always a toss-up as to this is what I want to what I have in the studio. I need a yellow, so maybe that yellow. That's too close to orange, so we'll go with the more yellowy one. Trying to decide. I think this will be the gray. Then we've got this one, which actually it's the same print, so maybe not. There is a very dark, and that would be different from that. So this may be the bat. I'm done with those. Oh, I need a brown for the door. And again, I want to keep similar to what we've got going over here. So that may be a good door. But let's see what else we've got. So we'll leave that one out for now. So the only thing here would be if I wanted to make this the ground and I don't want it the same texture as the sky, I could use that for the sky. I think I will. I'm going to use that one for the sky. So this one is going back over there. There's the sky, the ground, and then for the door, right now that's my leading candidate. So you have to think about your colors and your textures. Like this is going to be the door and that's the ground and that's the sky. These are the same textures. So would it be better to go with that, but then these are the same textures, but it's a softer texture. It's less likely to be noticeable. So I think I will do that and that one. There. There's the stars. So we're still short some grays. So that's the bat. This is the ground. This is a greenish gray. That would be good as accents on the bat. Here is a grayish gray. It's too dark. We've got more neutrals. This might help. I like that for the bat. That for the pavement. That's too light for his accents. There we go. I really want it subtle. I don't want it to be like in your face. So if that is the bat, the accents, and that's his nose and his ears, and that's the ground. I think I'm going to go back to using this for the ground and the nose and the ears. Less fabrics we have to put in the pattern. And this goes over here. I think we may have everything. Let's see here. Let's check it out. So we have the purple. We have the very light gray. We have the tan for the door, the yellow for the doorbell, and the stars. Why is the doorbell yellow? Because it's lit up. Do you ever see those doorbells that have a light behind them? That's what I was pretending was happening there. We have the orange for the hat, which I may use a different orange, but for now we're going to use this orange. Then we have the hat. Then we have the darkest gray for the bat. The dark gray for the accents. There's my light gray. And then we have black and white for the eyes. And I think that's everything. So the only thing I'm going to check is Matthew's collection has the witch's fabric, or the spiderweb's fabrics, but it also has a stripe, and I want to see if the stripe is tiny enough to be like a hat band. But in the end, I think we may end up with that orange. So that is our Batty and Happy all selected. So next up is to get ready to cut it. Alright, so we have our purple and our gray, which goes like this. And there's the door. So these get sewn together, the rest of it is applique. I'm going to use my Cricut Maker to cut these. I've saved an SVG file of it, which is the file you use on a maker. But you can also just take the templates that come with the pattern, trace them onto Fusible Web, iron them onto your fabrics, and then cut them out on the drawn line to create it. We have a video on Fusible Applique that walks through the whole technique, and I will link it below. But for this guy, I think we're going to try the Cricut again, see how he works for this. So first, I need to open the SVG file in Cricut. Before I do that though, I'm going to make sure I have all these colored differently so that they will cut in batches. So let me do that first. So when you use an SVG file in Cricut, what I do is I open the file and I get it to show me what the cut mats are going to be, and then I know what size to cut all these pieces. So, and I'm gonna write them on the back of here so if I have them for when I go to write the pattern. First, we're gonna go to new project. And then we're gonna go to upload. And I'm going to pick my SVG file. And I'm going to insert the images. Okay, so it shows all the images. And then over here it shows you the cut thing. So then when I go to hit make it, because I've color coordinated everything, it shows me how many mats. So there's 9 different colors in the piece, and like here's the white, and I need a piece of fabric that is 4 inches by 2 inches. So if I cut a piece 4 by 2, and I put Fusible on the applique on the back of the fabric, and then I put it on my mat, I should be able to cut this piece. So that's what I'm going to do right now, is go through and click on each one, so it will tell me how big of a piece I need to cut, and how big a piece of fusible web I need to put on the back. And you can move these around. Like if I want to make this more of a square, that's one of the beauties of this designer software. So we can do that. Now I have found, and I haven't done a lot with these, but I have found that like when you have something that's more intricate, spread it out. If you have the fabric, spread it out and give it some room to get in those corners and pieces and cut. Otherwise it may like lift it up and jam it up a little bit. So I'm still working on what works best, but I have learned giving it a little bit of space works great. Same for this one. This has got a real detailed piece. Just gonna move these pieces around to give myself a little more room. Like that one I'm gonna rotate so it fits a little better. And there's a red boundary box around this outer edge. That is the edge of your fabric, or that's the edge of where it's gonna cut. I pull it away from that because again, it gives it a chance to get into the meat of the fabric and actually cut it. So I'm gonna get these ready, get the Fusible on there, and we're gonna cut them and we're gonna see how well we did. For this project, I'm gonna use Transweb to see how that one works. We usually use Heat and Bond Featherlight, but I'm trying to experiment with different ones to see which is the best one to use with the Cricut. So we'll be back when I get all those pieces ready. To prep our pieces to use in the Cricut Maker, it's kind of just like the same way we do Fusible Applique. I cut a piece of fabric larger than it needs to be, and a piece of fusible web larger than it needs to be. Again, I'm getting the sizes off of the cutting mats once I broke apart my SVG file. And then I square this up to the size I think I need. That way all the edges are sealed with the Fusible and they won't get caught in the cutter, because I have had a couple times where the fabric pops up and then it gets caught on the cutter. So this for me seems to be the way to go. It's a little extra step, but it's kind of like some insurance to make sure it doesn't get caught and that it gets cut the first time. So once I've got all of these pieces ready, and this is the last one, we are ready to load them onto cutting mats and cut our little bat out. I'm really excited to see how this guy looks when we get him all done. I designed him while I was up visiting some friends, and there's a bat up there at the cabin, and I was like, oh, we need a bat for Halloween. So this is how Batty and Happy came about. So here are all my pieces ready, and I have them in order of the cutting mat. So when I cut mat 1, that's the first piece on top. And it's going to ask for the straight cutter. You can cut these with the rotary cutter, but there's some really intricate parts to it. So we're going to try this blade first and see how we do with that before we jump over to the rotary cutter. I'm not sure yet which one works best when. I am definitely learning as I go, but so far that little cutter has worked very well. So this is a fabric grip mat. And the other mat that you can use is the light grip mat. The fabric grip mat, the grippiness is very, very sensitive. You don't want to touch it. You want to use a palette to scoop it up. These light grip mats, I haven't tried it yet, but my understanding is I can wash this and then it'll come back grippy again. So these have a little more versatility. I'm not really sure yet why we use these over these, but I intermix them. So first thing you do is you put it on your mat and you put fabric side down, and I've already reversed all of the pieces so you don't have to turn on mirror image in the Cricut software. Okay, so my big issue with cutting with this Cricut is that the pieces don't stay stuck to the mat. So what I've done is I've taken some painter's tape, which is very low tack tape. Well, this is drafting tape. It's a very low tack tape. And this time I taped all 4 sides down, and look at that, it pops right out. It worked. So, you know, that's not how it's designed to work, but sometimes if you want it to do something and it's not working with you, you got to think outside the box. So let's cut the rest and see if it works. The other thing is I discovered I think my blade is dull. Seeing how this is a fairly new machine for me, I don't know how long the blades actually last. So we will continue to problem solve as we cut, and I hope you learn from this without having to go through it. So there's the hat pieces all cut. I'm going to keep going forward and then I'll go backwards and press down the ones that we missed. So next up, this is going to be an interesting one. There is a lot of pieces on this one. But again, we're going to brayer it down. And you can even see it slides while I'm brayering it. And this mat is not that, I've only used this mat I think once or twice. So I'm not sure I'm really thrilled with these mats. But I do love the way it cuts, so we will figure out a way to make it all work. And again, some drafting tape. You can get this probably on Amazon. I buy it at an art store. I am cutting it in half lengthwise so that it doesn't stick off the mat. You don't want it getting caught in the machine. And again, up top here, and it's just keeping this from sliding around. Because what's happening is it slides and then it gets caught under the mechanism and then it can't do what we want it to do. Alright, so that is all anchored down. This one has a lot of pieces, so let's see how it does. So I didn't put this piece on the mat right. So I have one more piece to cut, but I'm going to pull all my other pieces because now you see that I've taped it. Look how easy these pop out. That was the key, this tape. But I don't want to untape it because I got one more piece to cut over here that I should have turned the fabric, but I didn't. So to pay attention to how it goes on the mat so you don't have to do what I'm doing. And there is my missing piece. Okay, so we're going to pull all of this off and do the next one. So we have our background sewn together. So this was actually 3.5, not 3. So let me just clarify that, but it's in the pattern correct. So there's the ground that got sewn to the sky, and then that got sewn to the house where the doorbell and the moon and everything is going to go out here. So we're ready to start assembling our little bat. I'm using an Applique pressing sheet. This is the Appli-Fuse mat from the Gypsy Quilter. I like it because it has a grip to it. So as I'm moving pieces around, they don't slide. They grips and holds in place. Okay, we're ready to start assembling. We're going to start with the little skull bucket and handle. Then we'll do the face and the head, then the hat. We'll build it in sections. And then we will be able to assemble it on the background, or have it assembled before it goes on the background. So the first thing is the bucket. So I have my skull pieces here. And I'm going to remove all the paper from the backing by scratching the back with a straight pin. And that creates a crack and peel, so I can then just peel the paper off. Or not, depending on how I do this. There we go. This is the easiest trick to get the paper off. Alright, once we get the paper off, I'm going to put the little chin, the bucket, so there's that part. Make sure I like it all. Okay, so there's the little bucket. Now, normally I would blanket stitch all the white with white, but in this case, I'll probably use a light gray just so that this aspect of the bucket shows up because it's white on white, so it's a little hard to see that. So there's that. Next, we'll do the head. Okay, well there are his little eyes. And he's looking towards the door because that's where the candy's hidden. So we're going to press those. And now you can see this is gripping, it's holding it, but I press those down just to make sure that they are not going to move because I like how they are. Move. Okay, so there's the hat. I think I like. There's his little eyes, and then we gotta do his mouth with his little teeth, his little fangs. So how we're gonna do that is, let me grab a fabric pencil. Okay, you wanna make sure you use a fabric pencil that does not disappear with the iron. So I'm using my bow and chalk pencil, and I'm going to draw his little mouth. Following the picture, and then these guys are super tiny, so you might need to have a pin to help you position them. And what I'll do is I'm gonna stitch on this with like a gray so that it pops off his little mouth. Now he's got little teeth. And I'm gonna fix this line so it goes around that tooth the way I want it to. There we go. So there's Mr. Bat's head. So move this aside. While I got him here, we're gonna do the doorbell. Alright, so now we've got our little head done. We've got our bucket done. We've got the moon. We've got the doorbell. So now we need to do his little body with his wings. I just love watching these guys come to life as you stick it all down on the thing. It's like a pile of fabric and then you suddenly have a bat or a character or whatnot. Okay, so there's that one. And now you can see the dark gray, it's just enough to be an accent, but not enough to like be popping off and knocking you out. So Yeah, see, this is why you don't put the eyes on. We're gonna take those off. And that's why you wanna use a temporary adhesive so you can just pull things off. So his head gets tilted and his eyes are going up. Okay, we're gonna put you on last. So that is Mr. Bat. And we're gonna go ahead and press it. Okay, so this is all pressed down. Just let it cool for a second. And then start with what's on the bottom and peel that up first, and that way you won't have it like pop off your piece. So there is Mr. Bat. So now we're gonna bring in the background. Lay this out. See that wrinkle there? We're gonna get rid of that. You always wanna make sure there's no wrinkles in your background so it lays nice and flat. We're gonna lay him down and he goes up. We're going to take the bucket, make sure that he is, see how that is too close to the 1/4 inch seam allowance. We don't want that to hit the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we want to make sure that's, see now that's much better. He's up where he needs to be. I think he's rotated a little too far. There we go. This is very close to the 1/4 inch seam, so we're gonna scoot this over. When you're positioning these, that is probably the one of the most important things is where is your seam allowance? Do you have at least a 1/2 inch around? If you do a 1/2 inch, you're good. Now we know where his little bat finger is gonna go, so we put the doorbell up. And then there is the moon. And again, make sure he's away from the seam. So once you're happy with it all, we press it in place. You always want to press it up and down first to anchor it down, and then you can move the iron around to really make sure it's down. Okay, so there is Mr. Batty and Happy. That's what we're calling this block. Now we need to pick our threads out, and then I'm gonna go and blanket stitch the whole guy. So there's that. All right, so let's go with our threads that I've picked for this. So we're gonna use obviously black on his body and on the hat and on the inside of the bucket. And this is Aurifil's 40 weight. And that's okay, I really want the bat to pop out, so we're gonna go 40 weight there. Then I had 2 grays to choose from, and we have light gray and we have dark gray, but I think I like the look of the dark gray on everything, including the bucket. So I'm gonna outline the bucket in this so you can see his little smile there. So we're gonna use dark gray, and we're gonna skip the light gray. I have the white for the teeth and the eyes. I have the yellow for the moon and the doorbell. And then I have the orange for the hat and the brim. And that should take care of all of our threads. Now you could stitch the whole thing in black and it looked more like a cartoon with an outline, but I'm gonna go ahead and match the threads. For years I only did black. Now I seem to be on the kick to match. There's no right or wrong, it's just however you want it to look. So we're gonna go ahead and finish the stitching on this. I've done a couple videos on stitching for this. I will show you a little over here. I'll probably stitch the moon so you can see it, but you can also check out our videos on how to finish fusible applique. That gives you more like how to do intricate pieces, and then how to use fusible applique with an applique pressing sheet's another really good video on our channel. I'll link both those below, but I'm gonna go ahead and set up and start little bat together. All right, so we're over at the machine. We're getting ready to do all the finishing stitches on our bat. You're going to want to use an open toe foot to do this. An open toe foot looks like this. It doesn't have a bar or a plastic there. It is all see-through. That way you can see your stitching as you go. On my foot, there is a center line right here on it, and I'm going to use that center line to guide it around my shape. This line should line up with the edge of my fabric. The blanket stitch goes straight and then bites, straight and then bites. You want the straight in your background fabric and the bite into the applique on top. So I'm going to start with our dark gray, and I'm going to show you how I travel around without cutting my threads and how I stitch my little guy down. And this first one is Aurifil 50 weight. So first we're going to do the skeleton head and the little face. And I'm going to start with the head, and I'm going to use the dark gray so that you can actually see this bottom. So you can see this bottom edge. When I do the white up here, I will actually use white because I don't want the stitching to show. I just want it down here. And that's just a personal preference. You can do it however color you want. But when you're ready to start stitching, you want to start with the biggest piece first to get warmed up before you go in and do this detail stuff. So I'm going to start with the top of the skull. And if I start right here, and I stitch all the way around, when I come back here, I can go ahead and stitch that part without having to break my threads. So I also do look at the piece to decide where's the path of least resistance and how far can I get without having to break my threads. I do not knot my threads, but I will go over the first stitch with the last stitch to lock it in place. And if you're not going to go all the way around, like in this case, I'll just do a reverse stitch or a knot stitch to lock it in place. So let's get started. So usually, if I remember, I can't say I always do it, I turn down my needle and pull the bobbin thread up. It is a good practice to do that, but sometimes I'm going so fast I don't think about it and just keep sewing. And that's just so that you don't have it all knotting underneath the back of the piece. So here we go, we're ready to stitch. The center is on the edge of my fabric, and the bite is going into that top piece. Okay, so, and the other thing is if you have needle down on your machine, turn it on, because now I need to lift this foot up, and the needle down will help me pivot around the needle. And I needed to put my foot up because I was at a right angle, and I needed to rotate the piece to make it easier to finish. And see now that stitching there, oh, you can't see it yet. Hang on a minute, let me get around. Now here I'm going to lift, rotate, get myself lined up again. You can do that as many times as you need to. You'll see when I come in here, I'll be doing it quite a bit because that's a really small piece. Before I get around to the other side, I do just get rid of these threads. Over the first stitch and back, and then I'm just going to come right down and stitch the little mouth. I guess it's the jawbone. When I hit reverse and went back to lock those stitches in place. Now instead of breaking my thread, I'm just going to bring it up and travel over to the eye. And that way I'll just snip the threads afterwards. It just saves some thread. It just makes it a little easier for me. You see I keep rotating, lifting and rotating. That's because these pieces are really small, so it doesn't take much to get around it. If you haven't done a lot of this, go slow and I recommend matching your thread to your shapes, because here you can see this contrasting thread. If I didn't do it neatly, it will pop right out. But if that was white and I missed and it wasn't as neat, you wouldn't see it. So contrasting threads are once you feel comfortable doing it. I'm going back over that stitch. Until you feel comfortable, though, I would use matching threads. It's a little more time consuming because you have to keep switching your threads on your machine, but you will be much happier with the results. So you can see where I traveled in between. So now before I start the next color, I go through and I snip all these little trail threads so they're not in my way. You want to do the same on the back because these can get caught if you have anything on your machine, on the table itself. And then it'll screw up your stitch, which then you'll have to rip it out, and that's never fun. So we're gonna just snip them and get rid of them. It's kind of like cross stitch. You always want your back as neat as your front. So I'm going to switch over and do the black. And then I'm going to do the black next because there's a lot of it. And that'll anchor everything down. And then we'll go in and do the white and the yellow and the orange. Alright, so next I need to sew this little mouth on here. And so I'm going to use a light gray so that it pops out, but I don't want to use white because it's going to be too stark. And what I'm using is I'm using a stitch on my machine. I don't know what it is. Let me pull you over. I'm going to use stitch number 6, but I'm using the 3 stitch lines. I'm not sure what that is, but that's the stitch I'm going to use, and I'm going to turn my stitch length, go under 1, and again we're going to use stitch number 6, the straight line. And we're loaded, and we have that stitch. I'm just going to follow the line, and I'm going to go slow, and it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So you don't want to start right on the end. You want to start just a little bit in from the end where you want it to start. And then you just slowly go follow the line. And it'll look like hand sewing without actually having to hand sew. And my friend Kathy Norton actually figured this out, and she used to do it when she made all our samples because we didn't always have time to hand embroider something. So this is a tip from her that I'm sharing with you. Alright, so there's his little mouth. So let's trim it out, and now I'll show you, get a close-up here. Okay. So there's his little mouth, and you can see how it looks like it's been hand sewn, but it's just done in the machine. So there we go. Alright, so here is our little Batty and Happy block. This is the free block for September for the Block Mania block hop. So last month we did the little owl. Month before we did a bucket and a shovel. So we'll see what comes up next month, but he is ready to go. This pattern is a free pattern on our website. You can just go under patterns and look for Batty and Happy. And then it's going to be in our blog, and obviously you're watching the video. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick tutorial on how to do this fusible applique block, and I thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, make sure you like and subscribe below. You can find the Whimsical Workshop on our website, thewhimsicalworkshop.com, and that has all links to all of our other social media platforms. Thanks for joining us.